Hello. So in this video, we're going to talk about one of the principles of visual rhetoric, which is grouping. And specifically, we're going to talk about the PARC system. So this is a four-part way of thinking about grouping. So to clarify a little bit, when I say visual rhetoric, what I mean is any kind of imagery, document design style that is intended to convey information and intended to persuade an audience of something. So TV commercials are visual rhetoric. Billboards are visual rhetoric. Bumper stickers are frequently visual rhetoric, but also things like resumes are visual rhetoric. Things like formal reports that have, say, a designed cover and things like this. Those are visual rhetoric. Sometimes the visuals are really, really central to the actual rhetorical project. Something like an infographic, for example, runs on an economy of images. The images do a lot of the persuasive work. Whereas with something like a resume, you're still dealing with document design, but most of the persuasive element is text-based. So this is a broad range of things that count for visual rhetoric. And there's a lot of principles of visual rhetoric, and I'm going to be doing a few videos on visual rhetoric, but the first one I want to talk about in this video is grouping. What grouping means is the set of spatial relationships between different objects on the page. And it doesn't have to be necessarily a page. Again, this can be a screen, this can be a billboard, this can be whatever it is. I'm going to say on the page because for rhetorical purposes, that's where we tend to work. But basically, grouping refers to how items on that page relate to one another. How close are they? How far apart? How are they organized relative to one another? So that's what we're talking about with this. Now, the PARC system is a set of four principles for grouping. It's proximity, alignment, repetition, and contrast. So I'm going to talk about each one of those, how they work, what's covered by them, and why they matter. So to start, proximity. Proximity deals with how close together or far apart things are. So why does this matter in visual rhetoric? Well, because things that are closer together we visually tend to assume that they are related. And so as designers of visual rhetoric, as designers of documents, we want to do that. Things, information, pieces of imagery or whatever it is that are connected should generally be closer together. Think, for instance, of if you're designing, say, a flyer for a concert. You want to let people know when and where that concert is. You put the address, the time, the place in one neat little package, one place. What you don't typically do is put, say, up at the top of the flyer, starts at 9 p.m. and then over right-hand side, middle of the page, here's the venue. Bottom left-hand corner, here's the street address. You don't break up the information in that way because it's confusing to viewers. So you would put everything together, maybe everything bottom center of the page, for instance. Time, place, location, etc., etc. Because visually that's going to make the most sense to viewers. So this is the thing that proximity does. Proximity can also establish distance. You can say these two things are very different, or these two things are less connected, and you divide those things on the page. So this is one thing you want to be thinking about, is how are you grouping stuff to make those particular pieces of information comprehensible to your viewers. So that's what proximity is about. Our second element of the PARC system is alignment. Now, I've actually done a video kind of focused really on alignment, which was my video on how to create multiple columns in a resume using Microsoft Word's tab stop function. But basically, alignment deals with having things located consistently along a particular axis. So if you think of your page as having a sort of grid system, right? Like if you took high school math or middle school math or whatever it is, you probably had graph paper at some point, right? Where just, it's lines. It's checkered lines, basically. If you think about a visual text in that way, alignment refers to following those lines. So it can be a vertical alignment, it can be horizontal alignment, it can be diagonal alignment, whatever it is. But you align things to create a couple of different effects. One is to create balance. We talked about again, this was a thing with the resumes. In my video about resume design, we talked about this. If you put some information, say the name of the job and the title that you held on the right-hand side of the page, and then you put the location and the dates that you worked on the left-hand side, or sorry, put that first information on the left-hand side, put the subsequent information on the right-hand side, you create balance. By having them on the same horizontal line, you create balance on that page. There's information on each side of the page, so it looks even. You can do the same thing vertically, information at the top balanced by information at the bottom. But the other thing that alignment does is it also shows relationships between information. If we can follow a visual line, think about bingo boards, right? You create lines or whatever it is, particular designs. That's all built on alignment. And so we can follow those patterns. So visually, alignment helps us to see connections between things, and it creates balance between items. So that's alignment. We got proximity, we've got alignment. Our third component is repetition. Repetition. So repetition involves using the same or a similar item multiple times. And there's a number of reasons you might do this depending on what the item is. If it's a particularly important piece of information, repetition is going to make sure that that creates emphasis. So that will draw viewers' attention to that. So let's say you were promoting a brand. You were promoting Royal Crown Cola, for instance. If you wanted to create a commercial promoting Royal Crown Cola, RC Cola, you would want the RC Cola logo to show up repeatedly. You would want the name RC Cola to be used multiple times so that viewers are sort of hit with that logo, that brand name over and over and over again, because they're more likely to remember it. So that's one of the things that repetition can do. If you're looking at repetition of something like design elements, this can help create consistency so that viewers feel comfortable with the document design elements you're looking at here. For instance, if you were writing, say, a formal analytical report for a business, you might use the same heading design on each page of that report to establish consistency. It doesn't necessarily have to give us information, but it makes readers familiar with how that document is set up, and so that has positive psychological effects. It makes us feel secure. And this is a very subtle psychological thing, in terms of reader psychology, but it makes us feel secure so that we can focus more of our attention on the actual content of the document rather than having to try and figure out, okay, how is this design working? So that's repetition. So we got proximity, alignment, repetition. And then our final element of the PARC system is contrast. And whereas the first three elements of the PARC system really focus on creating connections between things or creating similarities, contrast focuses on difference. So it evokes distinctions between things. And there's a number of reasons you might do this, one of which is to create emphasis. So this is another element of reader psychology. When we hit something that is different from what we've been seeing, it draws our attention to it. Because we have to sort of refocus to figure out what this thing is doing, this thing that's different than what we've come to expect. So, for instance, a lot of versions of the Bible have Jesus's language in red text. This is contrast, and it draws our attention to the language that Jesus uses in order to highlight what he is specifically saying. You can do the same kind of thing in other documents. Let's say you were, again, promoting a concert. If you put all of your text in, say, a light blue, but then the name of the band, whenever that shows up, is in bright yellow, this is going to create contrast. It's going to draw our attention to it because it's different than what we've come to expect. So this is a way of creating emphasis. Contrast can also be used basically just to divide things. So let's say you have one half of your, let's say you're doing a billboard. One half of it has a black background with an image on it. The other half has a white background with text on it. That distinction between the black half and the white half is visually going to give us a border to distinguish the image versus the text. So this is another element that contrast can be used for. It is, again, about creating differences to help viewers visually navigate what's going on. So those are the elements of the PARC system: proximity, alignment, repetition, and contrast. These are all grouping strategies. They help you think about how to lay stuff out on the page or in your video or whatever it is in order to create visual meaning for your viewer.